Jenna Price had always lived her life with one guiding principle: status mattered. At 32, she had worked hard to build a life surrounded by luxury, exclusivity, and comfort. She wore designer clothes, dined in five-star restaurants, and vacationed in the most expensive destinations. There was no room for imperfection in her carefully curated world. She expected the best, and she got it. On the morning of her flight to New York, Jenna stood at the gate, sipping a coffee from a high-end cafe. The airport was bustling, but she felt no rush. She had been there before, comfortable and composed. As she scanned the room, her eyes caught an older man sitting alone across the terminal. He was in his 50s, with graying hair and a face weathered by time. His clothes were simple: an old blazer, faded jeans, and worn-out shoes. The unbranded duffel bag at his feet looked like it had seen better days. Jenna's perfectly manicured lips pursed slightly as she observed him. He didn't belong in her world, and that thought made her slightly uncomfortable. Jenna quickly turned her attention away from him, noticing the first-class line moving forward. Her flight had been booked in the premium section as usual. A small smile played on her lips as she imagined the comfort awaiting her in the front of the plane. She had no intention of sitting next to someone like him, this man who clearly didn't fit her definition of refinement. She walked to the front of the gate, passing the man as she entered the boarding line. He was already making his way to the general seating section of the plane, while Jenna slipped into the luxury of first class, settling into her spacious seat. She tucked her carry-on neatly into the overhead bin, smoothing down her clothes and making herself comfortable. There was no reason for her to think about the man again, she assured herself. But for some reason, she couldn't shake the thought that he had somehow, in his very presence, disrupted her day. The plane took off, and Jenna tried to enjoy the comfort of her seat, but her mind kept drifting back to the man. Who was he? Why was he traveling alone? He seemed so out of place, so different from the people she was used to. She tried to focus on her book, but the questions in her head only grew louder. As she glanced across the aisle, she saw him again, sitting in the general seating area, his faded clothes standing in stark contrast to the elegant passengers around him. She quickly turned away, mentally dismissing him as just another person she didn't need to think about. But something felt off. She couldn't quite explain it. This nagging feeling that she had made some kind of mistake. The discomfort grew, but Jenna buried it, focusing on the plush seat, the catered meal, and the small luxury of her life. Hours passed, and the cabin lights dimmed for rest. As Jenna tried to settle in, the sound of soft footsteps interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, miss," a voice said from the aisle. Jenna looked up, startled to see the same man standing there, a small crumpled piece of paper in his hand. "I think you dropped this," he said, holding the paper out toward her. He stood there for a moment, his weathered face looking uncertain. "Actually," he said, hesitating slightly, "I overheard you talking with your friends at the gate, and I wanted to ask, did you know there's a difference between people who travel with money and people who travel for experiences?" Jenna was caught off guard. Was he really talking to her, asking her that question? She tried to process his words, but found herself struggling. He noticed her hesitation and smiled kindly, almost apologetically. "I'm sure you've worked hard for everything you have, but not everything worth experiencing comes with a price tag. I've traveled all over the world, not in luxury, but I've learned more about life, people, and myself than money could ever teach me." Jenna felt a flush of discomfort. She had always considered herself open-minded, but something about the man's words made her uneasy. How dare he speak to her this way? She was the one who had the perfect life, who had worked hard for her success. Yet here he was, challenging her understanding of what mattered in life. The man didn't seem to notice her discomfort. He continued, "My father used to say, if you want to see the world for what it truly is, stop looking at it through your own lens of privilege. I've seen things, met people, and learned from experiences that money can never buy." Jenna felt a pang of guilt, something she hadn't expected. How many times had she looked down on people like him, judged them by their clothes, their appearance? She had spent her life chasing status, chasing comfort, chasing luxury, but had she ever truly lived? His words lingered in her mind long after he turned and walked back to his seat. The rest of the flight passed in a haze for Jenna. She couldn't shake the thoughts he had planted in her mind. She had been so quick to judge him, to dismiss him as someone beneath her. But his simple, honest words had struck a chord. As the plane descended and the lights of New York began to sparkle below, Jenna realized something profound. That small encounter had done more to shake her worldview than anything her wealth or status ever could. She thought about her life, about how she had focused so much on outward appearances, neglecting the deeper connections that made life meaningful. Weeks later, Jenna found herself boarding another flight to New York. This time, the familiar unease about the man didn't fade away. When she reached the gate, she spotted him again, sitting alone, looking peaceful in his simple clothes. But this time, Jenna didn't turn away. She didn't head straight for the premium section. Instead, she walked to the back of the plane, choosing an economy seat. When the man boarded, she raised her hand, silently inviting him to sit next to her. He looked surprised but nodded and accepted. As they talked during the flight, Jenna realized just how much she had missed, how much she had taken for granted. The man, Henry, shared stories of his travels, of the people he had met, the lessons he had learned. Jenna found herself listening, captivated by his perspective. By the time the flight landed, Jenna had learned something she would never forget. True wealth wasn't found in first class, designer handbags, or status symbols. It was found in the connections you made, the people you met, and the experiences you shared. Jenna's life had changed forever, not because of a luxurious vacation or a new purchase, but because of a simple, humble man who had opened her eyes to a world she had been too quick to judge. And in that moment, she realized that the most valuable things in life were those that could not be bought.